My son's wife laughed when she said it. Not a mean laugh, not even a loud one, just a small, private sound, like she was sharing a joke with herself that I wasn't supposed to hear. You know she's going to need a facility eventually, she said to my son, standing right there in the kitchen doorway while I was still sitting at the table. My coffee was still warm. I hadn't even finished it. My son David didn't look up from his phone. I set my cup down slowly. The ceramic made a soft sound against the wood. Neither of them noticed. "I'm right here," I said. My daughter-in-law, Nicole, glanced at me the way you glance at a television that's been left on in an empty room. "I know, Ruth. I just meant eventually, when things get harder. We have to be practical." She turned back to the counter and began sorting through the mail, separating what was hers from what was mine, with the efficiency of someone who had already decided which pile mattered. David looked up then, just briefly. "Mom, she's not wrong. We're just thinking ahead." Thinking ahead? I had been thinking ahead since before either of them was born. I thought ahead when I worked double shifts at the hospital, so David could have piano lessons and new cleats and a senior trip to Washington he still talks about like it was his own accomplishment. I thought ahead when I sold the car my late husband Earl had left me to pay the deposit on this house, the house where I now occupied the back bedroom at the end of the hall, the one with the sticky window and the smoke detector that chirped every few months, until someone remembered to change the battery. Usually me. I didn't say any of that. I picked up my coffee and finished it standing over the sink, rinsed the cup myself, and went back to my room. The door didn't have a lock. I had asked once. Nicole said it would scratch the frame. The closet in that room held 3 boxes I had brought from my own house 18 months ago when David suggested I move in. Suggested. He had made it sound like a gift. "We have the space, Mom. It makes sense. You shouldn't be alone." I believed him because he was my son, and I had spent 67 years believing that love was a reason. Inside the 3rd box, beneath a folded quilt Earl had given me on our 30th anniversary, was a manila envelope. "I am the game. I am the game." Tucking it beneath the quilt carefully, smoothing the fabric over it, the way you cover something you want to keep sleeping. I didn't open it that morning. I just rested my hand on the quilt for a moment, feeling the shape of the envelope underneath. And then I got up and went to make breakfast for everyone before Nicole left for her spin class. That was a Tuesday. By Thursday, something had shifted. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. I was in the hallway on my way to get a glass of water when I heard Nicole's voice from the home office, low and deliberate, the way she spoke when she thought the words mattered. "I'm just saying, we need to know what she actually has before anything moves forward. It's not unreasonable, David. It's responsible." Then his voice, quieter, something about accounts and paperwork, then hers again, firmer. "She lived on a nurse's salary for 40 years. She doesn't have anything, which is exactly why we need to be the ones making decisions." I stood in the hall for a long moment. The wallpaper beside me was a pale blue stripe. I had helped Nicole pick it out the year they bought this house. I had written the check for the painter because they were short that month. I went to get my water. I went back to my room. I closed the door as quietly as I could. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter I had received 2 years before from an attorney in Asheville, North Carolina. A woman named Patricia Holloway, Esquire. The letter explained that my mother's older sister, my great-aunt Cecilia, had passed away at the age of 91 and had left her estate to be divided between her 2 living relatives of record. One was a second cousin I had never met. The other was me. My share of the estate had been deposited into a trust account at a regional bank. The amount was $214,000. I had told no one. Not David, not Nicole, not my neighbor Bev, who was my closest friend and who kept secrets about as well as a screen door kept out rain. I had told no one because something in me, Some quiet animal instinct that I hadn't listened to in years said, wait, watch first, see what this house is. Now I knew. $214,000 had become $231,000 over 20 months of careful, low-risk investing that Patricia's office had helped me set up. I had handled everything by phone and mail. Nothing came to this address. Nothing ever would. I folded the letter back into the envelope and placed it inside the quilt again. Then I picked up the small prepaid phone I kept in my cardigan pocket and sent a text to a number I had memorized. It read, "Ready to move forward. Available Monday. By Saturday, I had an appointment." I didn't tell David where I was going. He didn't ask. I said I was meeting a friend from the hospital auxiliary, and he nodded without looking up from his laptop. Nicole was doing something in the backyard. I heard the screen door close as I'd put on my coat. The coat was old, a dark burgundy wool that Earl had always liked. I wore it because I wanted to feel like myself that morning, like the woman I used to be before I became the woman who rinsed her own coffee cup because no one else remembered to. The Eternal's office was on the second floor of a building near the center of town. Clean, quiet, no artwork trying too hard to seem warm. A woman at the front desk took my name and offered me water. I said yes this time. The attorney was a man named Stephen Chu. He was younger than I expected, early 40s. With reading glasses he kept taking off and putting back on. He had reviewed the documents I had mailed ahead. "You have a clear structure already in place," he said, spreading the papers across his desk. "The trust account is in your name alone. No joint holders, no secondary access." "Correct. And you'd like to add beneficiary designation?" "Yes. I had thought about this more carefully than I had thought about most things in my life. My granddaughter, Lily, she's 14. David's daughter from his first marriage." Stephen noted this without reaction. "Not your son." "Not my son. He moved on. He was good at his job. We can establish a revocable trust with your granddaughter as sole beneficiary, contingent on her reaching age 25. In the interim, a trustee of your choosing manages distribution. I'd like that trustee to be Patricia Holloway in Asheville. She handled the original estate. I'll contact her office for confirmation." He looked up. "Is there anything else you'd like addressed while we're here?" I opened my purse and took out the small notebook I had been keeping for the past 18 months. Green cover, narrow ruled. I placed it on his desk. "Yes, I'd like a document prepared that itemizes my contributions to my son's household since I moved in. Not to seek repayment, for the record." Stephen picked up the notebook carefully and turned to the first page. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture did, just slightly. "This is detailed," he said. "I was a nurse for 38 years. I kept records." He turned a few more pages. I watched him take in the columns. The $200 I had contributed toward a bathroom renovation because they were short. The $900 I had paid for Lily's school trip to Philadelphia when Nicole said they hadn't budgeted for it. The 3 months of groceries I had covered entirely when David's company went through a restructuring, and he didn't want to say how bad it was. The $1,500 for the new fence that Nicole had decided on without asking anyone, but then mentioned the cost at dinner in a way that made the table go quiet. There were also other entries. Not money. Lily picked up from school 43 times while Nicole was at her various appointments. Dinners made on nights neither of them felt like cooking, which was most nights. The prescription David kept forgetting to refill that I refilled for him 3 times because I knew what happened when he skipped it. The time I sat with Nicole for 2 hours when she cried about something at work, and I never mentioned it again, not once, not even when she was cold to me the very next morning. Stephen set the notebook down. "I'll have everything drafted by end of week. Shall I send it to an address here or a different one?" I gave him the address of Bev's house. She didn't know it was coming. I would explain later. Some things required a small act of trust. When I left his office, I walked to a diner 2 blocks over and ordered a bowl of soup and a piece of pie. Cherry. I ate slowly. I read a newspaper someone had left on the table. I did not check my phone. I was not needed for anything for 1 full hour, and I let that be true without feeling guilty about it. The bill was $11. I left 4 for the tip. Back at the house that afternoon, Lily was in the living room doing homework. Textbooks fanned across the coffee table. She was David's daughter from his first marriage, 13 years old when I moved in, now 14, and growing quieter in the way that teenagers do when they are not yet sure which adult in their life is safe. She looked up when I came in. "Hi, Grandma Ruth." "Hi, sweetheart. How's the homework?" She wrinkled her nose. "History. It's a lot of reading." I hung up my coat and sat on the end of the couch closest to her. She didn't move away. Lily never moved away. She was the only person in this house who scooted toward me. "What period?" I asked. "Civil War." She tilted her head. "Did you actually learn about this in school, or was it like recent news?" I laughed. It surprised me how easily it came. Very funny. She grinned and went back to her reading. I sat beside her a while, not doing anything particular, just being there, which was its own kind of gift. After about 10 minutes, she reached over without looking up and patted my hand twice, the way a much older person might. Then she kept reading. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The document arrived the following Friday. Or rather, it arrived at Bev's house, and Bev, bless her completely, managed not to open it and not to tell anyone about it, though she did call me and say, "Ruth, I don't know what you're planning, but it arrived and I need you to come get it and also explain your whole life right now." I went over Saturday morning under the excuse of returning a casserole dish. Bev made coffee and I told her everything. She sat very still, which was not like Bev at all. Then she said, I used to wonder, watching you in that house. Something always felt like it was being held too tight." "I held it too tight," I said. "No," she said firmly. "They held you too tight. There's a difference." I drank my coffee. Outside, Bev's bird feeders were busy with sparrows. One small red finch kept being displaced by a larger bird and kept coming back anyway. I watched it for a while. "I need you to hold one more thing for me," I said. "An envelope. You don't need to know what's in it. I'll tell you when to give it to Lily." Bev nodded. No questions. 40 years of friendship earns that kind of silence. I went back to the house just before noon. Nicole was in the kitchen cleaning the coffee maker with a precision that suggested she was working something out internally. David was somewhere upstairs. The house had the particular tight quality it got on weekends when everyone was home and no one quite wanted to be. Nicole heard me come in and looked over. "Where'd you go?" "Bev's. She returned to the coffee maker. Then, without turning, "David and I want to talk to you tonight. After dinner." "About what?" A brief pause. "Just some things. About the arrangement going forward. Being in the house. It's nothing bad." The last 3 words had the careful tone of something rehearsed. "All right," I said. I went to my room and sat at my small desk and wrote a letter. I had been composing it in my head for weeks. Now I wrote it by hand, slowly, in the neat block print I had learned charting patient records. I wrote it to no one in particular and to every person reading it. I made you beg to play. I am the game. I wrote the rules, broke them, and made you beg to play. And made you beg to play. In the way dinners are quiet when something is about to happen. Lily sensed it immediately and asked to be excused early, which Nicole allowed with unusual speed. The plates were cleared. David poured himself a second glass of wine. Nicole folded her hands on the table. "So," she started, "we've been thinking about the long term." I said nothing. David cleared his throat. "We love having you here, Mom. You know that. But the house is getting tight, and honestly, Nicole and I have been talking about the finances, and we think it might make sense for you to contribute more formally, like a monthly amount, just to make it more official." "How much?" I asked. Nicole named a figure. It was not small. I looked at David. He was looking at the table. "And in exchange," Nicole continued, "you'd have more security here. Officially. We could have something written up. Like a rental agreement," I said. "More like a family contribution plan." She smiled. The smile was the kind that has already won the argument before you've started. I thought about the notebook in Stephen Chu's desk. I thought about 38 years of nursing. I thought about the check I wrote for the bathroom tile, and the 3 months of groceries and the 43 school pickups, and the 2 hours I spent sitting with Nicole while she cried about something she never once mentioned again. I'll think about it, I said. Nicole's smile shifted slightly, not dropping, just recalibrating. Of course, we just want everyone to be comfortable. Of course, I said. I excused myself, rinsed my glass, and went down the hall. That night I did not sleep badly. I slept the way you sleep when a decision has already been made and your body knows it, even if your mind is still catching up. I woke before 5, when the house was completely still. I got dressed quietly. Dark slacks, a cream blouse, the burgundy coat. I packed one bag, the one that fit in the overhead bin, the one I had kept ready for 2 weeks, without letting myself think about why. Clothes for a week, the green notebook, the manila envelope, the prepaid phone, a photograph of Earl and me at Lake Michigan in 1987, him laughing at something I had said, me half turned toward him, caught in the middle of something real. I went to Lily's door and stood outside it for a moment. Then I knocked, very softly. She opened it in about 30 seconds, blinking. Hair loose. She saw the bag. She looked at my face. Grandma Ruth. I'm going, sweetheart. Not far. I'll be at Bev's for now and then somewhere better. Her eyes went wide, but she didn't cry. She was 14 and steady in the way some 14-year-olds are, already more solid than the adults around them. Are you okay? I am. I'm more okay than I've been in a long time. She looked at the bag again. Does Dad know? He will this morning. She stepped out into the hall and hugged me hard, both arms tight, her chin at my shoulder. I held her for a moment. She smelled like the lavender shampoo I had bought her because she mentioned once in passing that she liked it, and I had remembered. There's an envelope at Bev's house, I told her quietly, with your name on it. She'll give it to you when you're ready. You don't need to do anything with it right now. Just know it's there. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were very clear. What's in it? Your options, I said. The ones nobody should take from you. She nodded. Then, will you still call me? Every week, without fail. I walked down the hall to the front door. I set my bag down and placed an envelope on the kitchen table, the one from Stephen Chu's office. 4 pages of itemized contributions, dated and totaled, with a cover letter that I had written myself. Not with anger, not with drama, just with the clean precision of a woman who kept records. The cover letter said, in part, I have provided this not as a request for repayment, but as a matter of fact. Facts have a way of making things clear that feelings for years could not. I am no longer available as a resource for this household. This is not a punishment. It is simply the truth, stated plainly, which I should have done long ago. I signed it with my full name, Ruth Ellen Morrow. Not Mom, not Grandma, not her. The door closed behind me with a soft, ordinary sound. The morning air was cool and very still. I walked to the end of the block and called for a car. The driver was a young man who nodded when I got in and asked if I preferred music or quiet. I said, quiet. He nodded again and drove. Bev was already up when I arrived. She had been up since 4, she said, sensing something. She put coffee on and did not make me explain myself immediately. She just set a cup in front of me and sat down across the table and waited. And the waiting was one of the kindest things anyone had done for me in longer than I could easily remember. I told her everything properly this time. The trust, Stephen Chu, the itemized list, the envelope for Lily, the bag by the door. Bev was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, where are you going to go? There's a small rental, month to month. I found it 3 weeks ago. 1 bedroom, a little kitchen, a window that faces east. I paused. I've never had a window that faces east. Every room I've lived in for years has faced west or had no window worth mentioning. Bev smiled. East is good. I think so. I stayed with Bev for 4 days. On the second day, David called. I answered. He was not angry, not at first, which surprised me. He was confused, and somewhere under the confusion, something that might have been shame or the beginning of it. Mom, I don't understand. You could have just talked to us. I did talk to you, I said. Many times, in many ways, you listened when it was convenient. Silence on his end. Then, Nicole is upset. I imagine she is. The list you left, he stopped. Started again. Some of those things I didn't know. I know you didn't. Another silence. Was it really that bad, living here? I considered the question carefully because it deserved careful consideration. It wasn't that you were cruel, David. It was that you stopped seeing me. You saw a convenience, an extra hand, a woman who would handle what needed handling and not take up too much space. I let you see me that way. That's on both of us. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. I didn't know about the money. About Aunt Cecilia's estate. I know. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to see who you were first. Because I needed to know whether my son saw me as his mother or as a resource. I thought about saying that. Instead, I said, because it was mine. He didn't push back. That surprised me too. We talked for another few minutes about logistics, about Lily, about the coming weeks. He said Nicole would need time. I said that was fine. Time was something I understood. Before he hung up, he said quietly, as if he wasn't sure he meant it yet but was trying it on. I'm sorry, Mom. I know, I said. I'm going to need you to show me that over time. Not say it once and expect it to be enough. Okay, he said. And that, for now, was enough. The apartment had hardwood floors and a radiator that knocked in the night at first and then became something I looked forward to. A small, reliable sound like a heartbeat in the walls. The east window was everything I had hoped it would be. The first morning I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and watched the light come in at an angle that turned the floor gold, and I thought, This is what I forgot I was allowed to want. I unpacked carefully. I hung Earl's photograph on the wall above the dresser. I put my books in a row on the windowsill, the ones I hadn't had room for in the back bedroom. A row of old paperbacks with their cracked spines and their pencil notes in the margins, from a version of me that had opinions, and wrote them down. On the third day, I bought a small plant for the kitchen. African violet, purple. The woman at the shop said they did well in east-facing windows. I told her I had just moved and was figuring out what did well in my new light. She smiled and said that was a good way to think about it. Lily texted that Friday. Bev gave me the envelope. I opened it. I sat on my bed for a long time after. I don't know what to say. I wrote back, you don't have to say anything yet. Just know it's there. Know that someone in your life is thinking about who you will become, not just what you can do for them. A few minutes passed. Then, nobody's ever done that for me before. I held the phone and looked out the east window. The sky was doing something complicated with clouds and sunlight that made everything look like it was being decided. Somebody has now, I wrote, and she's not going anywhere. I wrote the rules, broke them, the game. I wrote the rules, broke them. I wrote the rules. I learned that I still liked cooking for one more than I had ever admitted. That the silence of a meal eaten at my own pace and to my own taste was a form of pleasure I had quietly mourned for 18 months without naming it. I wrote the rules. The day slept better when the room was fully dark, which it hadn't been in the back bedroom because of the streetlight through the curtain that didn't close all the way. I learned that I was not lonely. I had confused loneliness with being ignored, and they are not the same thing at all. Nicole called once. It was a short call. She said she hoped there were no hard feelings. I said I didn't have hard feelings. That hard feelings required a kind of investment in the past that I had decided to put elsewhere. She was quiet for a moment, trying to locate the insult in that, and then said, well, she was glad we could be adults about it. I said yes. I did not say what I was thinking, which was that I had been the adult in that house every single day I lived in it, and that being mistaken for furniture does not mean you are not a person. I didn't say it because I did not need to. I had already said everything that mattered on 4 pages of itemized fact left on a kitchen table before dawn. David came to see me the following month. He sat in my small kitchen and I gave him coffee, and we talked for 2 hours about things we hadn't talked about in years. Earl, my years at the hospital, what he had been like as a child, which he claimed not to remember but listened to with more attention than I expected. At one point, he looked at the photograph on the wall, the one from Lake Michigan, and something moved across his face that I recognized because I had seen it in the mirror sometimes. Grief that hasn't finished yet. He would have liked this place, he said. Yes, I said. He always wanted me to have East Light. When David left, he hugged me at the door. A real hug, not a polite one. I held on for a moment. My son, who had made a mistake, who was beginning the slow work of understanding it. I had not stopped loving him. Love does not stop, but it can stop being unlimited and unconditional. It can have a shape that requires you to be worthy of it. That is not cruelty. That is not cruelty. That is honesty, which is the more durable form of love. Lily came on a Saturday in November. I made her hot chocolate, and we walked to the park nearby and sat on a bench, and she told me about a project she was working on for art class, something involving photographs and fragments of handwriting. She wanted to use old letters, she said, things that had been written to someone and mattered. I told her about a box I had packed away, letters Earl had sent me when he was stationed overseas before we were married. Some of them were funny, some were not. All of them were true. Could I use some? She asked. For the project? Yes, I said. On one condition. What? That you read them first. Not to use them, just to know them. She agreed immediately, which told me something about her. We walked back to the apartment as the light was going. She held my arm on the uneven part of the sidewalk, steadying me without making it a production. At the door, she hugged me goodbye and said she'd be back next month, and I believed her. Inside, I made tea and sat at the east window as the last of the afternoon folded into evening. The street below was quiet. Somewhere, a dog barked twice and stopped. A child on a bicycle rode past with no hands, wobbling magnificently. I thought about what it had taken to get to this kitchen, this window, this cup. I thought about the envelope under the quilt and the long months of patience, watching, waiting to understand what kind of house I was living in before I decided what kind of woman I was going to be inside it. I had waited too long. I knew that. But I had not waited forever, and that distinction matters more than the waiting does. My name is Ruth. I raised a son and worked 38 years, and loved a man until I lost him and went on being alive after that, which is harder than it sounds. I have paid for things that were never meant to be mine to pay for, and kept quiet about it far past the point when silence was serving anyone well. I am not quiet anymore, not because I became someone different, because I remembered who I had been before I made myself small enough to fit into other people's convenience. The trust is sealed. Lily's name is on it. The life I am building belongs to no one but me. If you have been waiting for permission to do the same, I want to tell you plainly, there is no permission. There is only the moment you decide that your life is not a courtesy you extend to people who have stopped noticing it. You are not a burden for existing. You are not furniture for staying quiet. You do not owe anyone the remainder of your good years in exchange for being tolerated in a room that used to belong to you. Take the east window. Buy the plant. Write the letter. It doesn't have to be loud to be real. It just has to be yours.